Okay, in case you haven't watched any of my prior videos, just let me say this. I adore Dolly. I kinda love everything about her. Her looks, her personality, and so on. And she's basically the main reason I watch the show. I think she's just a lot of fun. But apparently there are some people that dislike her. At least that's what this entry on TV Tropes claimed. So far I have not been able to confirm this, as I only know a handful of people who watch the show and they all like Dolly. And I don't see many people actually talking about the show online either. For Christ's sake, the show didn't even have a subreddit until I created one, and no one has signed up for it yet. Sure, everyone is entitled to their opinion, even if they are wrong, as Dolly Dalmatian is the most precious thing ever, and jokes aside, sure, if you don't like Dolly, that's okay, not everyone has the same taste after all. But let's take a look at the reasons why people might dislike her. First of all, there's of course her personality and attitude in general. If this kind of character simply doesn't appeal to you, well, fair enough, I guess. Next up, apparently there are some people that project their dislike for Steven Universe's Amethyst onto her because they share the same VA and some surface characteristics. Now I think this one is a bit silly. Sure, Amethyst and Dolly have a few similarities, but there are also a lot of differences. I could probably do an entire video on this, but I'm not really gonna bother to elaborate on it here. Point is, they are very different characters at the end of the day, and while she might sound like Amethyst, is that really a problem? I mean, if she were to sound a bit more British, I would appreciate it, but I think the voice suits Dolly, so I consider this a non-issue. And finally, there's Dolly's treatment of Dylan. I mean, yeah, she teases Dylan a lot and likes to make fun of him, but that is very much mutual. Dylan never really fails to take a potshot at Dolly either. This also ignores the fact that she shows multiple times that she cares a lot about him and that she is very protective of her family in general. While you might make a point that she teases Dylan more than he teases her, it never really came across as malicious to me. In any case, I thought it might be interesting to take a look at the episode in which Dolly is arguably at her worst. The perfect match. Now this episode is about Dolly playing matchmaker and helping her friend Roxy to win Dylan's heart, as she suddenly developed a crush on him. At first she doesn't want to, and she is rather grossed out by the thought. Their mutual friend Snowball thinks, however, Dolly should help Roxy and suggests that Dolly should take Roxy with her for a sleepover, so she gets a chance to get close to Dylan. Dolly still doesn't want to until Roxy makes puppy dog's eyes and agrees. However, their attraction is not exactly mutual, as Dylan is at best scared of Roxy because she is like twice her size, and at worst she appears at somewhat gross. Yet Rottweilers are not exactly the cutest of all dogs. Okay, here's a point to be made that this episode makes fun of big and overweight girls. I mean, just imagine if Roxy and Dylan were human instead of dogs, the whole thing would kinda boil down to, haha, she is fat and stupid, so it's funny. This is my least favorite part about this episode, but it's not that bad and they get over it rather quickly as Dylan actually warms up to Roxy once he realizes that they have some common interests, as they are both into Poodle Wolf, a fantasy board game Dylan brings up in a couple of episodes, and astronomy. First of all, it shows that Roxy is not quite as stupid as she might appear, as she actually knows quite a lot about this kind of stuff. This episode might portray Roxy as gross for a laughter or two, but quickly shows that her appearance doesn't really matter and that she's actually rather sweet and clever, and Dylan learns to appreciate her because of that. And I think that is a rather positive takeaway, that you shouldn't judge anyone by their first impression and get to know them. Dylan and Roxy start to spend more and more time together, to the annoyance of Dolly, who grows more and more jealous. Now it is not quite clear how much time passes over the course of this episode. Maybe it takes place over just 2 days, which would mean that Dolly got jealous after only a couple of hours, which would make her very petty. I'm however rather inclined to believe that there was a bit of a time jump of multiple days, especially since Roxy realizes that she might have been neglecting Dolly for that time. I think if the episode had a montage instead of just 3 scenes in which Roxy ignores Dolly in favor of Dylan, it would have gotten that point across better. Context matters after all, and this detail can make a giant difference on how we perceive the characters. Now Roxy wants to apologize and prepares with Dylan a surprise for Dolly to cheer her up, but Triple D goads Dolly into taking action. Well, and then we get this.
Nice love shack! Build it for your girlfriend, did ya?
Girlfriend? What? No, it's not like that.
Hey Roxy, check out your dancing boyfriend!
Okay, obviously Dolly's overreacting here and takes it way too far, which I'm okay with because it's freaking hilarious to see how insane Dolly is in the scene. Just look at her face! You might dislike her for it, but I take it as it was intended, as a comedic exaggeration of her jealousy. It's so over the top that I simply can't take it too seriously. But okay, let's take it at face value for a moment. How bad was Dolly in this episode really? Well, she didn't really want to go along with the idea until her friends sort of pressured her into it. However, she took some joy in hooking Roxy up with Dylan as it made her brother uncomfortable. The latter is admittedly somewhat mean. She knew that Dylan didn't like that and still kept going. There is a point to be made that she crossed the line there, but frankly I don't think by much. Especially since the whole thing blew up in her face and they actually end up liking each other. Then she became jealous and her retribution was again disproportional. But again, it was mostly played for comedic effect. It was exaggerated for the sake of comedy, which is how most cartoons work. I think the more important question is, why was Dolly so angry at them? There are a few things to consider. First of all, she didn't actually want them to hook them up in the first place. She probably didn't expect it to work out anyway. She was also rather surprised to see that Roxy actually likes Poodle Wolf and astronomy, like Dylan. Next, she describes Roxy as her BFF and she felt like she was losing her to Dylan. Once Dylan and Roxy started to get along, they more or less ignored Dolly, something Roxy admits. So it is not entirely unreasonable that Dolly felt neglected. Moreover, I think that her friendship to Roxy is way more important to Dolly than it might appear at first. Dolly has 97 siblings, so she basically has to share everything with them. Roxy and Snowball are her friends, and a bit of an escape for her. When she hangs out with them, she doesn't have to deal with her siblings. Sometimes she just needs a break from them. That might sound bad, but it's just natural. I love my siblings, but sometimes I just need some time for me. Dylan has a similar escape in form of his treehouse. When he needs some time away from the family, he goes there. Dolly instead hangs out with her friends. She already has to share everything else. It's not just that her friend starts to hang out with her brother, she suddenly had to share the one thing she could call her own, her best friend. So, while she indeed overreacted, I do think it is somewhat understandable. Now Dolly realizes her mistake after Roxy explains that they prepared the tent for her, and Dylan says that she didn't see Roxy as his girlfriend but just as his best science pal sometimes, unknowingly breaking Roxy's heart. But she get over it in the very next scene. And I guess this is a good point to wrap things up. The perfect match is overall a pretty fun episode. Now, as I pointed out, I can understand that people don't like how Dolly is portrayed in this episode, and yeah, she's arguably a bit meaner than usual. But it is mostly played for laughs. While her jealousy is rather exaggerated for the same reason, I do think that it is at least somewhat understandable why she is so bothered by her BFF spending this much time with her brother, and I think it is more important to look at how important Roxy is to Dolly than to focus on how Dolly treats Dylan in this episode. But what about you? Did you like this episode? Anything that bothered you? What are your thoughts on Dolly as a character? Let me know in the comments below. I am Tricky Fox. Stay foxy.